So with the President having taken the oath of office for a second time and now leading a coalition government, there is a very long list of social problems that almost define our society. Two of them may stand out at this moment. The one is the high levels of violence against women, the number of attacks by men on women, and the other may be the fact that so many people are forced to survive on social grants. Nomahlubi Jakuja is a senior researcher at the Social Policy Initiative. Nomahlubi, good afternoon. Thanks very much indeed for coming in. There's been so much talk during the election around a basic income grant, and the ANC keeps hinting that it will do it. But if you read the fine print, I think they've given themselves lots of wiggle room. Now we have a coalition government. The DA also believes in social grants quite strongly. Is this the moment for a basic income grant, or do you think the coalition will stop it from happening?
If you look at the coalition, many of them in their manifestos had some form of a grant, whether it's the job-seeking grant from the DA. And I think for me, this presents really an opportunity to expand on, because it's not just for job seekers. What about those who don't make it to matric or who are not seeking for a job or whatever reason it is? I think the ANC is the most progressive party in terms of really, in past interviews, the President Ramaphosa has been in support of a universal basic income grant, and we would like to see him really steering and taking leadership in moving all members of the coalition towards a universal basic income grant. And of course, this is the time for a universal basic income grant, not mentioning the high unemployment levels in South Africa and the high inequality challenges in our country. And I think it's one of those policies that all of the parties in the coalition are actually, to some degree, but in agreement on, and I think it would be really a legacy policy for everyone involved.
It would also give them a lot of legitimacy, wouldn't it? I mean, you've got a coalition government. Politically, it would be a good time.
Absolutely.
What difference would it make? And I mean, this takes us straight, I'm sure, to the level of the grant, how much it would be.
On the numbers we have done as the Social Policy Initiative of calling for the Universal Basic Income Grant at 1,500 Rand and implemented progressively in a space of 3 years, we actually have worked out models that it would eradicate poverty in South Africa, at least poverty in terms of the lower bound food poverty line, completely in the period of 3 years.
So obviously I get the sense that that's not what government is thinking about. My own sense, I could be wrong, is that what the ANC is really thinking about is taking the current SRD grant of 370 Rand a month and just making that permanent. What difference would that make if that's what happened?
If they keep it at the current level of, it's now accounting for inflation at 370, it really won't be, it's not enough to end poverty in the 3 years. I mean, some would say something better than none, but in terms of really what we need, as we see a universal basic income grant as a macroeconomic policy to stimulate demand in the economy, and it's needed at a very high level than the current 370 grant. So for us, we're still sticking to the 1,500 Rands, just on creating demand in the economy and with the aim of ending and completely eradicating poverty in 3 years.
Phinah Kodisang joins us now. She's also with the CEO of the Soul City Institute. And Phinah, good afternoon to you. The other issue that I mentioned, of course, is the issue that we have with so much violence against women. The President talking about this explicitly in his address in his first term. He held 2 summits around gender-based violence. Just before the election, he signed a new law signed a new act on this into law. Do you believe that this government is going to be able to make any dent in the incredible rates of gender-based violence we have over the next 5 years?
Thank you for this question, Steve. I think, listening to the president and hearing how, now it's newness, we are looking forward to new things and this government of national unity, we need to remember one thing, that they come in with different policies on gender, they come in with different policies on transformation, and as different parties, they represent a different constituency. So the big issue for us, which is what you are asking, is around gender-based violence and how it has been treated in the past, by past administrations, right? We see how it has become a lip service of some sort, how everything about women is, we say it because we want women to believe that we are for women, we are standing with women. But when it comes to implementation, we failed dismally. And we saw even with the summit that you are referring to, the report just came out recently, almost a year later. That's when we are receiving the report for the summit that happened last year. That shows you that, we are not taking issues serious, because issues that were discussed in the summit that that were in the report are issues that should have been tabled in Parliament, issues that should have been top of mind, top of the agenda. But if a report is sitting somewhere only to be released now, that's telling. That tells you a lot, even with the manifestos that we saw, that, women were hidden somewhere with crimes. Gender-based violence is hidden somewhere as a crime and not as a pandemic as declared by the president. So we are worried that, again, we are going to see lip service being paid to gender issues, especially gender-based violence.
There's so much about this, Phinah, that's about policing. I mean, you'll know far more about it than I do. But we obviously need leadership in the police that takes this seriously and can maybe even change the culture of police, the way a woman is treated when she goes to a police station to report an act of violence against her. Is the person who becomes the police minister important in that, the person who will occupy that position in the new cabinet?
Very important, and I don't see why it can't even be a woman. And it doesn't mean that all women understand women issues, but I believe that if we take a stance where we say, let's also show how committed we are to women issues by putting a woman who has power, who can be held accountable, because sometimes we put women in positions, but they don't have the power to do the work and the authority to make the decision. So whoever is going to come into that role of replacing Minister Bekele, at least let's show how committed we are to gender issues by, one, putting a woman in there, but not a woman just because we are trying to tick a box. It should be that it's a woman who understands the issues and a woman who's committed to pushing the government, the administration, to change their behavior in terms of how they deal with gender-based violence, starting with the police, in how they take the evidence, in how cases are recorded, in how women are treated when they come to report, and also the whole justice system, how it commits to ensuring that the prosecution rate is increased, because we are failing also in that area. As we have seen in the past, we have not reached even 50% in terms of our prosecution rate. So I'm advocating that show us that you take women seriously, put women in positions, but give them the responsibility and the power, not just people who will be there as the quorum.
Nomahlubi, some things are very difficult to do in government. I mean, one of the reasons we see so much violence against women is that you can't put a police officer in every home. Some things, though, we've done before, and one of them is, in fact, social grants. So if we were to now try and make a substantive difference to the lives of millions of people through a social grant, it's something we've done before. I would like to think that would make it easier to do. It would just be an expansion.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things at least in South Africa, the narrative has always been pitting jobs versus grants. And I think in terms of at least seeing leadership, really starting to see grants as working in conjunction with the efforts to either seek for jobs, and also for one of the expectations we want to see is really the president holding the private sector accountable for creating jobs in South Africa, even going to the extent of setting targets, annual targets of how much jobs the private sector should implement per year, and incentivize those job creations, whether it's through tax breaks or whatever the case is, so that grants are really supporting mechanisms in the ecosystems, in the economy, but they're not replacing jobs or an alternative to jobs, but really, and it's not government's role to create jobs, but they can create a conducive environment for the private sector, and part of that conducive, creating that conducive environment is really for us that UBI, because in a documentary we did where we documented the beneficiaries of the current 350 grant and really asked them what they use that grant for, some of the key patterns that emerged was really for transportation, for data costs, things that are enablers in getting them into the marketplace and moving them, and the idea is not for them to stay on the social grant permanently, but to create as the social grant as that bridge between unemployment, university, whatever the case is, and going into the marketplace.
Nomahlubi Jakuja, Senior Researcher at the Social Policy Institute, Phinah Kodisang, CEO at the Soul City Institute. Thank you both very much indeed.